Hi everyone, Holly from Safe for Kids here, and I have the utmost pleasure to introduce you to Glen Fisher. I came across Glen's work in a Facebook group that I'm in, and I purchased his amazing book. I couldn't put it down, to be honest. I don't tell this very often, but I'm actually dyslexic. But I pushed through it and could not put his book down because it's a heartfelt book about Glen's experience as a child growing up. We're about the same age, actually, and it's about his life growing up in the cross. So, Glen, welcome, and would you mind telling us about your story?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for bringing me on. I appreciate it. And as I said to you earlier on, anything that helps prevention for me is a huge plus. So to try and cut it short, so my story was that when I was around 7, I came home one day and my dad was taken to jail. Prior to that, I'd had many incidences in the family home of remembering sexual incidents. And my dad went to jail for a fairly heinous crime. All of us kids were put into care. And it was when for the first bit of time, we were in an orphanage, but it was when we got out of the orphanage when my life really started to take a different shape. My mum, a full-on alcoholic who was incredibly violent, had all these men around the house, and I was raped one night by my Uncle Pat, who we called Uncle Pat. He wasn't an uncle. And that was the start of the first abuse that happened to me in my life. It was a violent, horrible incident. And for me, the hardest thing about that incident was that my mother used to say to me all the time, "I'll put you back in that home every single time we used to mess up." And I remember sitting there so many times with it on the tip of my tongue, wanting to say, "Mum, Pat raped me." And I just couldn't find a voice. I couldn't find the courage to do that. And, moving forward, I ended up at my dad's house where things weren't much better. I couldn't understand how I was allowed to be in his custody. And I started running away from home. And for that, I was placed into violent boys' homes, places like Darrick and Yasma, Minda, and I went right through the whole lot of them until around about 14. When I got out of Darrick, I ran away from home again, but this time I went to Docks, and I pleaded with them. I said, "Look, I don't want to be locked up in a boys' home. I don't want to be hurt anymore." I said, "Help me, please, help me." And so they put me into foster care. But the foster care place that they put me in, prior to my going into that foster care place, one boy had been shot dead by police. Another person, a girl, had been molested. One of the men living there had a prior sexual conviction for raping a 2-year-old child. And I was put into a bedroom with 3 adult men, where again, I'm sexually abused. And so getting further forward is where the book really starts to take shape, is where I run away and I land on the streets of the cross. And that's where I really didn't realize how vulnerable I was. I mean, I remember when I first got to the cross, I thought, no one's going to tell me what to do anymore. I'm my own man. I'm my own little man. No one's going to hurt me anymore. And I end up living in a refuge. I've got a little girlfriend, and but unknowns to me, this refuge is run by 5 men, 4 of which are pedophiles and one's a drug dealer, who have, this group of men have been joined together to target children, like specifically to aim at vulnerable, homeless children. And after that refuge closed, I'd gone through a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of incidents. And just after the refuge closed, my girlfriend was murdered. She was brutally murdered, and they caught her killers. And then what happened was they were convicted. They got 20 years in prison. And then Judge Yeldham, who himself was caught having sex with kids in Museum train station, committed suicide just after setting these killers free, which means that under the double jeopardy law, we couldn't do nothing. To me, that was a conflict of interest. After all that abuse I went through, it hit me so hard that I spent the next 30 years a heroin addict, and my life took some twists and turns that were terrible, horrible, and that's the shortened version of my story. There's a lot more to it, obviously, and if you do read it, you'll see that it's very detailed. A lot of violence in my childhood.
I think people do read it because, stories like yours need to be told. I mean, you haven't mentioned it yet, but in the book, this is why we had the Wood Royal Commission, because, back in so what years are you talking about?
So it was around 1980 when I landed on the streets of the Cross. And and I was right up there till about 1988, 89. And then I went back again in 92 for another stint. That was as an addict.
So, Australia's got in New South Wales has got a very dark history around that time, because of the Wood Royal Commission and the corruption of the police and stuff like that. So even if you had have told, do you think it would have eventuated anything?
I think if I had spoke up then, I'd be dead. That's the honest truth. That one of the problems that people didn't understand was back then that the police of King's Cross ran the heroin trade, which meant that, and the pedophiles supplied the money to the children who were using the heroin. So it was in the police's best interest to protect pedophiles because they were actually the money source that gave the money to the kids that were using the heroin. So no, I actually was hurt one time really badly, and I actually went into the police and I told them what had happened, and they virtually told me to F off, which I think I wrote about that in the book as well, that incident. I was shocked, they just didn't care. And as you say, I was involved with the Wood Royal Commission. I've been involved in 3 trials, 1 extradition, and also the recent commission into institutional abuse. And the Wood Royal Commission, although it unloaded a lot, it still concealed a lot, and it didn't really get to the root of the problem for mine.
So basically your childhood set you up, to be groomed. One of the big things I'm passionate about is trying to unpack what grooming looks like for parents, because people think that perpetrators, are in trench coats and they're hiding behind bus stops, ready to jump out and nab your children. Grooming is such a insidious practice. Are you able to tell us just how, it was so easy for you to be groomed?
Well, there's several ways that I was groomed. One of the ones was by other kids. Other kids become already abused, and then they get a bit older, and then they start seeking out younger kids. So that was one of the things that they do, is just by simply introducing you and putting you in that environment, talking about things as if it's normal behavior, things that are happening like smoking pot, having sex, those kind of things. In the refuge for me, as I said to you, I did an interview with the detectives where I had to introduce a pedophile to an undercover detective in one of my cases. And he said, we targeted prepubescent kids that come from broken homes that no one cared about. And that was me in a nutshell. When you go, the problem is that the 2 biggest problems is, one is that the biggest influence on your kids is other kids. And no matter how, that's your biggest influence. The second one is that these predators are very mindful on filling a need. And so what happens is when a child lands on the street, they're broken, they've been abused, they've been degraded, and they feel their self-esteem is so low that it doesn't take a lot to feed that self-esteem. Oh, you're a beautiful boy. Oh, geez, you're such a smart kid. I like the way the other kids warm to you, Glenn. You have a real knack of making other kids warm to you. Like you're almost one of the bigger, the kids follow you, and those kind of words, and then little things like, have you eaten? Would you like something to eat? Where are you staying? Would you like somewhere to stay? I can give you somewhere to stay. Oh, the Cross is a very dangerous place. If you hang around with me, I'm well connected. I can look after you. They feed into those fears, those insecurities, and the needs. That would be the 3 bigger ones, your needs. And needs aren't just a financial need or a housing need. They can be the need of just someone to tell me I'm okay, I'm normal, I'm a beautiful person, or I'm not all those names that I was called in the boys' homes or by my mum and dad.
Now, Glen, your story is really horrific. But to be honest, children in mainstream, in a loving home, are being groomed just as easily because they're online. Yeah. And they do target children online, especially through gaming now. What you were talking about earlier with the other teenagers, that's trafficking.
Yep.
But children online are being groomed in games. They might be given V-Bucks or Robux, which are virtual dollars for people that don't know, in these games for naked images. And then it can start from there. Once they get the first image, then the children are sextorted. So I don't want people to listen to your story and go, oh, well, that was a really sad story and poor Glenn, because it's no different for children sitting in their bedroom. And one of the things that I work really hard on is trying to educate parents around being your child's go-to person. I have this catchphrase, be your child's Google. One of the things that we do in our program is teach children to have a safety team of 5 adults they can talk to if they feel unsafe. And quite often, when I'm helping the children make this safety team, because on the thumb is people from their home and then 2 people from school and then 2 people from the community, because we want to give kids a wider spread of different people that they know. In every class that I do this in, I have children saying, Holly, I don't want anybody from my home on my safety team because, mum's always on her phone, on Facebook, or dad comes to my cricket match and he never watches. So kids are feeling really disconnected. So I'm hoping from our talk that parents will realise that they need to be connected with their children, because people that prey on children, use so many tactics. And, you've given us some really good examples, but, they're looking for the insecurity in children, for kids that aren't connected with strong role models and things like that. So as a child, back then we never, we're about the same age, so we never really talked about this sort of stuff, but we were always taught respect your elders, do as grown-ups tell you to do. It's always that authority figure. When a parent leaves their child with a babysitter, do as your babysitter tells you. We don't tell children, well, don't let them touch your private parts, and if they do, come and tell me. So do you think, had you had education, did you ever think to tell a teacher, for instance?
Absolutely. I think, not as a kid, I didn't. So my life was so as you've read, it was in such turmoil that I never really had somebody. The only people I ever had were actually pedophiles. But on 2 points that you mentioned, one is that we need to really look at the red flags, and parents need to learn what they are. And one of them is a very simple one, which is questions. When a person who's older than a young person starts to befriend our children and starts asking them questions, that's a start to grooming. They're asking, because what they're doing is they're getting a feel, is like, oh, where do you come from? Where do you go to school? Do you have a boyfriend? They might seem like simple, innocuous questions, but they're all loaded questions. They're all questions that they're giving to try and get an understanding of that need for that child. And just on one other point where you mentioned, my life was a one where I came really broken to the cross, but that's not the norm. I cannot tell you how many children I've seen, 14 or 15, arrive at King's Cross. They've got a good mum or a good dad, but their mum and dad works all the time, so they don't have enough time for them, and they're just disconnected. So they arrive on the cross, and almost within a year, you see it. They've been abused, they're stripping in clubs, they're addicted to heroin, and the decline is so fast. I've seen so many, I cannot begin to tell you how many children I've seen die under the age of 18 on the streets of the cross. And today it's not just in the cross, it's Australia widespread. The internet has given predators access to your children in a second. No child is safe from predators today.
Phenomenal. I'm really hoping parents are listening to this, because, no parent in their right mind would drop their children off in the cross, or here I'm in Western Australia, our cross is Northbridge. No parent would drop them off on a Saturday night at 10 o'clock and say, see you in 2 hours. And yet children are going online unsupervised. When I'm working with children in primary school, 2/3 of 8-year-olds tell me they go online when their parents are asleep. And when I say, do you go to sleep with your bedroom, with your back door and front door wide open? Oh, don't be ridiculous, Holly. Or would you go up to a total stranger and tell them where you live? Don't be ridiculous, Holly. And yet, children are online, and every perpetrator can come into children's bedrooms, but parents just, they think it's never going to happen to my child. My child's a good child. If anything happened to my child, they would tell me. And again, because of the grooming process, and that's why we have 5 people on the children's safety teams, because realistically, most children aren't going to tell a parent. It might be a teacher, a neighbour, their best friend's parent, because kids ultimately want to protect their parents too. I mean, it came across in your book, they're still your parents. Yeah. And, kids inevitably want to protect their families.
Yeah, that's true. For me, I've been a loyal person my entire life, and even to this very day, I felt discomfort at telling the full story of my mum and dad. As you say, I've been very vague in some areas around it. I just wanted to say, like, parents, a lot of people have this illusion that it won't happen to their child. And do you really want to take that risk? There's simple tools that we can do. And the first one is educating ourselves. But the biggest tool around the internet that I can recommend to everybody is parental control. It is such a simple tool to set up, and it enables you to have some sort of ownership as to what your kids are accessing. And it simply will enable you to stop them from being able to access certain places. It tells you who's in touch with your kids, and they don't even have to know that you've got this set up. You can get it set up through your Wi-Fi. You can set it up for your phone. You can ring Telstra, and they will set up all this stuff for you. Parental control. And the second one, and the most important one of all, is parents educating themselves so that they know where they're going when they try to educate others, because it's very hard for a parent to connect with a child in this kind of conversation. So if they can get as much education on how to approach their kids and how to have them conversations, I think that that will go a long way as well.
You're right. And, we're both not here to parent shame, but you don't know what you don't know. And, when I'm doing a parent workshop, the bane of my life is getting parents along to a free talk to keep your children safe. I've actually changed the way I put out my flyers now, because I used to try the horrible statistics of 1/3 of children will suffer some form of sexual abuse, whether it's being exposed, somebody flashing them, seeing pornography, right to the most heinous acts. But no matter what the act is, it changes the child from that day. And so, but parents go, oh, but I'm a good parent, it would never happen to my child. So I've actually flipped it. And now I say, would you know what to do if your child's best friend came to you and said something had happened? And parents go, oh gosh, no, I don't. Oh, maybe I need to go along to that talk. So it's almost along the lines of it takes a village. Yep. But honestly, I'm not here to parent shame, but 1/3 of children, you would not back a horse on 1/3. And so you just can't take that chance. Like you say, get educated, share information with other parents. I'm seeing quite a bit in the media at the moment, in social media at the moment, about sleepovers. And, there was a mum in America she said she didn't let her kids on TikTok, didn't let her kids go on sleepovers, and the barrage of abuse she copped from that. And whether kids go on sleepovers or not, that's up to the parents. But what I want parents to do is have the conversation. Say to them, my kids know protective behaviours. Who will be home in the house? What is your family's stance on technology? Because there should never, ever be any technology in a bedroom and things like that. So, I'm not telling parents to let the kids go on sleepovers, yay or nay, but we need to advocate for children, because just being children makes children vulnerable to perpetrators.
That's right. And I think that the second line of defence is, the first line of defence is educating parents and parents having conversations with the kids. I think the second line of defence is, there's 2 of them. One is educating kids, educating kids to protect each other, like a buddy approach, like you know, so that it might not be happening to you, but you might be noticing something abnormal happening with one of your friends, and you go, oh, that's just Karen, that's just Johnny, you know, no, that's your friend. You know what I mean? Step up, go and say to mum and dad, listen, I've got a friend, John, who's got a friend named such and such, who's approaching them and buys them gifts. And to me, it just doesn't look normal. And if it is normal, so be it. Better be safe than sorry. Check it out every time. And the other one I think needs educating is educating the educators. We have a lot of people who are book smart, but they're not lived smart. And there's a difference. And I think that there's a place for both. I think that those that are in places that have the ability to do it need to interact with those who have been through it, so that they can work on a medium together to get to the best place, because it's all about, as you say, protecting the kids, you know.
You're exactly right. You know, I do the, you know, it has to be home, school, and the child all working together. Lots of people, to be honest, lots of people are against protective education, and they say it's taking away children's innocence and you're frightening children. And, you know, if you don't know somebody shouldn't be touching your private parts, or if you don't know what your private parts are called, I mean, I have teachers that are too scared to say, like, we sell a book, Everyone's Got a Bottle, which I love, and it goes through the anatomical names. The amount of teachers that want to return it saying, I couldn't read that to my grade ones. Yeah. Or I've even had parents tell me how they have, their children do use the correct anatomical names, and their children are being told at school, you're not to use those dirty words at school. Yeah. But we don't say don't use elbow. And so as a society, we think we're so progressive, but to be honest, we are not, and we are making it so easy for perpetrators as a society, we're almost grooming children to make it easier for them to be groomed. Do you think I'm right?
I agree. And look, I'll go back to the cross when I was a kid. It was flooded with people looking for children. In fact, there were more adults on the street there that were abusers than were not, by a big number. You know, it was phenomenal. It was a congregation of kids that all congregated to one place. Now the internet, these guys are smart. You know, they know how to get this access to them. And the internet has just given a whole nother level of connection to people to be able to connect to kids.
I read an article recently that said because of COVID, online grooming is up 120% in the last 2 years. Yeah. And so many of the child exploitation material that is made now is made by children because they're being groomed, and once they have that first image, then they're being blackmailed. Yeah. So our program's based on two themes. We all have the right to feel safe all of the time, and we can talk to someone about anything. And these are the anythings. We need parents to say, if you ever make a mistake and send a picture to somebody, whether you think it's, you know, she's a 14-year-old girl and you're a 14-year-old fella, or vice versa, please come and tell me. You know, we've got the E-Safety Commission, we've got the AAAC that can help. But again, if parents don't know that there are these agencies out there that can, you know, get the images back and things like that. So again, it comes down to being educated for parents.
And that's where it comes to the parents, where they really need to make their children understand that they're safe to approach. As I said, one of the things I wrote about in my story, that's the most frustrating part, is there are so many times where I knew something wasn't right and I needed to tell someone, but I was afraid. I was afraid of not of the abuser. I was afraid of the people that are supposed to love me and care for me's response to it. You know, do they care more about that person than they do me? You know, like, do they care enough about me to do something about it? Kids need to know that if they come to you, that you're not going to go rah. You know, you've got to be able to sit down with a level head and say, okay, what do we do together to address this? And you need to make them feel, first start with, you know, I love you, I care about you, and that's our priority here, is protecting you. And as I said, other kids, protecting each other. That is, I think, is the key, one of the biggest keys.
Beautiful. One of the take homes I hope parents take away from my talks is I want parents to say 1 million times to their children, nothing you'll ever tell me will stop me loving you.
Yeah.
You know, they need to hear that 1 million times to get that through to them. If you come home and you've been suspended from school for fighting, I might be angry at your behaviour, but I still love you. There is nothing that'll ever stop me loving you, because, you know, otherwise kids are always looking for that external validation. You know, social media has turned everything on its head and made it so much easier now, because, you know, kids are doing all these, you know, sexy poses because they want everybody to tell them how gorgeous they are, how pretty they are, how handsome they are, how strong they are. Yeah. But we need parents to, you know, fill that void so that people can't get to their children.
One of the other avenues that I seen often as a kid that was a gateway, if you like, to predator to child connection was drugs. It was often a pot dealer or somebody like that who, you know, the child's like 14 or 15 and they're suddenly getting pot or something off a 20 or 24-year-old, and they think, oh, gee, that guy's cool. He's 24 and he sells pot to me. That's not cool. If you're a little, you know, if you're a child and you've got a friend that's a child who's getting drugs sold to them by an adult, think about that person. You know, they're getting rich off a child's misfortune. They're actually introducing that child to a world, trust me, that is horrible. People don't understand the progression and the connection of the two.
One of the resources that I've created actually talks around that sort of stuff. And I call them secret enablers. We teach kids that there are safe secrets and unsafe secrets. But these secret enablers use tricks, lies, bribe, blackmail, threat, guilt, shame, and con them. And, you know, bribing kids or, you know, giving them gifts and all of that sort of stuff. You know, you said earlier about the flags. One of the things I say in my training to parents is, if anybody wants to spend more time with your child than you do, an adult, ask the question. You know, we teach kids about their early warning signs and to trust their guts. If, you know, your body will react if you don't feel safe. And parents need to do that too. But sometimes, you know, it's, oh, you know, you're being silly, you're being neurotic. I know when parents leave a workshop, they're sort of, oh, everybody's a pedophile. And that's not the message that I want them to take. My message is, if you ever get that old feeling, we would call it intuition or gut feeling, but with kids we teach them, it's called early warning signs. I mean, funnily enough, I'm wearing my t-shirt today. Listen to kids, believe kids, and trust your guts. Yeah. We need them to, you know, there will be these red flags that go up, and we want parents, you know, you don't go up and accuse them, but, you know, listen to your body and listen to your children. If they say they don't want to kiss somebody or they don't want to go to somebody's house, you know, when it's a quiet time, ask them why. Give them permission to tell you the bad stuff.
Language is really important. There's a few words you touched on there, guilt and shame, that I'll come back to. But in relation to language, I remember as a little boy being taught by my mother, never dob, snitches get stitches, and all these sort of things. And that was ingrained into me growing up, never tell on someone. So that taught to a child is a very dangerous way to teach your children. You know, that's the first one. The second one is guilt and shame. A lot of people, when they hear about sexual abuse, they think about young girls getting abused by an older man. I can tell you now that it happens a lot more to boys than people realize. It's the problem is that boys have got this stigma attached to them that I can't say anything. You know, like I'm no longer a man if that happens. As you said before, I'm gay. If people know that I've done that, they'll think I'm gay. There's a shame and stigma around it, and that allows a lot of abusers to get away with it, because the percentage of people that come forward is phenomenally low in the male side of things.
Yeah, we were talking off screen, and we were saying that when I was fortunate enough to spend some time with Professor Frida Briggs before she passed away, and, you know, she believes that boys are more sexually abused than girls, that they're just less likely to tell us. And one of the things that I'm hoping to talk more openly about with children is, when we do talk about our early warning signs, like butterflies in your tummy and your heart racing, your legs feel like jelly. When you're cold, you get goosebumps. When you're hungry, your tummy rumbles. So our bodies are amazing, and they give us these, you know, they're designed to give us certain messages. And we need to break it down for young people, because sexual abuse doesn't make people gay, as you mentioned before. But in some young men's heads, they might think, oh, I got an erection, therefore I must have liked it, therefore I must be gay. We need to be open and honest with them and say our bodies are designed to react in a certain way. Just because you were touched in a certain way and your body reacted, it didn't mean you liked it. It didn't mean you consented. It's just your body reaction. So, to try and take some of that shame and stigma away, because they did nothing wrong. The only person that did anything wrong was the perpetrator. And we have to help victims. And that's why I'm so glad to be able to talk so openly with people like you, because it's only through hearing people's stories will we change anything. We have to touch people here. And hearing stories like yours, can only help parents think, well, I need to step up. I need to have those difficult conversations, because, if 1/3 of our children are suffering some form of abuse, we can't have that, because, when you look at the mental health of our children because of COVID and social media, plus all of these other things. So, and you mentioned it before, language is so important, giving kids the language to be able to disclose.
When I wrote the book originally, I wrote the book very graphic, and it was very straightforward. And then I gave it to an author, a lady who helped me write, and she can change the whole language in my book. And then I reread my book back and I went, this isn't what I need. This is not what the public needs. They need to hear it straight and raw. And a lot of people who have read my book said it is very raw and very honest. But I think that's the language we need to speak in. And I was going to say also, we're ingrained as parents to train, like if our girls go somewhere, it's like, we're our daughters. We're our daughters. Do the same with your sons. We're our sons. Put that same protective model around your sons that you do your daughters.
Glen, thank you so much. I really recommend Predator's Paradise. I'm going to put the links in the show notes. It is a very graphic read, but I'm actually going to set my sights on I believe it needs to be made into a mini series, because, we've got Underbelly and all of those about the same time that it was happening as what was happening to you. But I really think, you talk so openly and so beautifully in the book about, wanting to be the voice for the friends that you've lost. And I think doing them justice through, so that's my personal mission, is to try and find somebody on your behalf to get this. It is in the public domain. Nothing we've said here is, private or can be misconstrued. It is all, it's not made up. This is real life, and you've lived it. So I'm so grateful for you to be so honest and share your story. And I'm just hoping that parents will take away something from what we've talked about here and have the conversations with their children.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you, Holly, for mentioning the book. I appreciate it. And I hope people do read it, because I didn't write the book to make money. I wrote that book because I needed not just my voice to be heard. I needed my friends. I lost so many friends. They're dead, children who have died. And, it's important to me. That's why I've spent all these years fighting in courts, for that reason.
Keep up the good fight, and we'll do it together.
Thank you, Holly.